Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a couple seconds. We'll give everyone time to be admitted from the breakout room. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Preparing Professional Materials and Optimizing Your Professional Brand. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Ashley McDonald. I am the Assistant Director of Events and Volunteer Management for Grand Valley Alumni Relations. If you haven't done so already, please introduce yourself in the chat. Share your name, grad year, degree, and why this session is of interest to you. Tonight's workshop is the second installation of our new graduate career programming series. With the support of our fellow GVSU alumni, Liana Voltago, Christina Green, and Cordell Zachary, we are able to offer you in-depth career support that is specifically catered to recent graduates and Grand Valley alumni searching for a postgraduate career. Before I hand it over to Liana, Christina, and Cordell for introductions, I would like to share a brief outline of tonight's program. Throughout the program, our speakers will rotate through. Each session will be facilitated by a GVSU alumni and will focus on a different learning objective. You will have 20 minutes in each session to learn from the facilitator, as well as have conversation and ask any questions that may be important to you. After each facilitator has had a chance to rotate through, we will reconvene and report out. We were going to separate into breakout rooms, but due to the participation, we thought it might be more impactful if we stay in a large room and have greater conversation. So because of that, we will not need to report out, but we'll have time for questions at the end. Programming will anticipate to be wrapped up around 7:30. So thank you for joining us, and I am going to hand it over to our leaders of tonight's program. They're going to give a brief introduction of themselves as well as their career journey before diving into their sessions. Cordell, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, sure thing. Nice to see everybody virtually. Cordell Zachary here, pronouns he, his. Also, for anybody who's visually impaired, I'm an African-American male wearing a gray polo shirt, a nice vibrant background of DoorDash in my virtual background, short hair. And really excited to be with you all here today. So yeah, just giving a brief introduction. I graduated in 2016 with my degree in advertising and PR. I got my master's degree in communications at Grand Valley in 2021. My first career out of Grand Valley was at Steelcase, where I did some cold calling, working with our dealers in the furniture industry. Then I did some e-commerce work, and then ended with some DEI consultancy work. And then today, I went with that thread of DEI consultancy, and now I work at DoorDash as a senior program lead for recruiting, partnerships, and events. So working with underrepresented talent and also university talent who are seeking roles at DoorDash, and doing that through really cool conferences and events. So I also live in Atlanta, so really excited to talk with you all today. And maybe I'll popcorn to Liana.
Sure thing. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Liana Voltaggio, and I graduated from Grand Valley in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies with an emphasis in international human resources, and also got an intercultural competence certificate while at GVSU. Then when I left, I went to Nissan, where I worked as an HR business partner supporting our R&D engineers for about 3.5 years. And while I was there, I pursued a master's degree in HR and organizational development from Eastern Michigan University. Wrapped that up, moved to an automotive supplier where I worked in a global HR role, supporting folks in IT and communications and purchasing all over the globe. So that was pretty cool. And then from there, transitioned to a subsidiary of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, where I worked in learning and development. And most recently, I joined Allstate in a fully remote role where I'm in a rotational program within HR as well. And right now I'm working in HR strategy. So we look at our priorities across the organization, our vision, our strategic metrics, all that good stuff. And it's my job to connect the dots and help everyone make sense of everything. But I also do resumes and cover letters and fun stuff on the side. And I worked in the Career Center at Grand Valley almost my entire time at the university. So really excited to be here and chat with you all today. So I'll hand it over to Christina.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Green, and I graduated from GV in 2012 with my bachelor's in advertising and public relations. While at Grand Valley, I was involved with several student organizations. Shout out to GV PRSSA and Grand PR, while also working on campus at the Career Center as well. So also shout out to Career Center. And I made it a priority to remain connected with GV and jump at opportunities like this. So I'm currently a member of the Young Alumni Council with Grand Valley. And just a little less than 2 years ago, I was based in Grand Rapids, working for Lake Michigan Credit Union as a senior community relations specialist. Last February, I relocated to the greater Boston area for a position with Harvard Medical School in their Alumni Affairs and Development Office. So as an assistant director of alumni engagement, I work with our newest graduates through their 20th medical school reunion. And before that, I was in various positions from community outreach to human resources. So I've seen the perspective of using social media and your personal brand to help you find a job, but also on the flip side of like from the company's perspective too, and what we're looking for and what recruiters are looking for online as well. So hopefully be able to give you guys some insights in that regard, but really grateful to be here and happy to chat with you guys.
All right, Cordell, do you want to jump into your programming about crafting a winning resume, identifying skills, drafting statements, and showcasing impact evidence?
Yeah, sure thing. And I got my co-panelists here, and they're whizzes at resumes, it sounds like. So if there's any tips, or if you want to unmute and chime in, would love that. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and let me know if you can see that. You should be seeing a screen right now.
Looks good.
Cool. All right. So at the beginning of the session, just wanted to give you some key indicators. If this really goes well and I accomplish my goal, you will leave the session and they'll be successful if you leave with tips to make your resume more attractive to recruiters. You better understand how to communicate and showcase your skills in your resume, and you're more confident in displaying your impact when going for any role. And as a precursor, I think the resume is one piece of the puzzle. There's so many more things to help you really land that job. And that's what the rest of our panelists are here to do, to tell the full story. So I know I already talked about a little bit about me, but want to delve a little deeper. So raised in Detroit, Michigan, and currently living in Atlanta. So I moved from Grand Rapids to Atlanta about a year ago for this role at DoorDash. Like I mentioned, I have my bachelor's in advertising and PR. I never was a part of like Grand PRSSA, but it was really cool to hear about that. And I had some really awesome instructors in the advertising and PR program. I then went back to get my master's degree in communications. This picture right here with my mom, she got her master's. She's a Grand Valley alum as well. She got her degree from MSU, her PhD, the same year that I got my master's degree. So we were able to share that moment. So I always love and commemorate my master's degree by showing a picture of her. And as I mentioned, I worked at Steelcase right out of college. I started as an intern my senior year while I was finishing up my senior year. And then I moved to DoorDash for this role that I'm in today. And I mentioned that it's a program lead for recruiting events and partnerships. And really what that looks like is there's some major conferences like Afrotech, like Grace Hopper, like Women Who Code, that we make sure that we have a brand presence, but also we're recruiting new talent. So it's a really cool way to engage with talent to help our brand. And it evolved from my work at Steelcase, working with recruiters to build diversity, equity, inclusion strategies. So been at DoorDash for almost a year, but it feels like an eternity. And then I'm always a champion for change. So when I was at school, I was involved in Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I was involved in business fraternity. I was involved in minorities in business. So I was always active on campus. As I now progress into my career, I'm part of a board for STEM Greenhouse. This picture here is a picture of me in my leadership program that I did recently. So just want to share a little bit about me, and I was in your shoes not too long ago. So just want to share that before we go into this. All right, so I want to see some engagement in the chat. So how much time do recruiters spend looking at your resume? I feel like I always hear this metric, but I want to hear your responses on it in the chat. So we got 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 seconds. And honestly, I think this always shocks me. Okay, 30 seconds, 5 seconds. Okay, we got a good array of answers, and the average recruiter or hiring manager spends 6 seconds reading a resume. And I'm sure from Christina, Liana, we've been in those shoes. You get an ATS full of 200 plus resumes for a role. You're expected to have a really good time to fill. So you are looking for key indicators on your resumes, titles, keywords that really stand out so that you can start to move along your recruitment process. So when we think about a resume, it's really important to make sure it's well crafted, because it's your shot. It's your one shot. It's your first introduction to the recruiters that you're putting yourself in front of. So let's go through. I'm going to show a good resume, a bad resume, and some ways to enhance your resume. So when we think about what constitutes a bad resume, and also I would love for this to be conversational. I know we have a smaller group, so if you want to unmute or add something in the chat, and maybe Ashlyn, if you see some things and I'm not seeing it, make sure you call it out. But yeah, if you have some questions through any of this, I'd rather me address questions directly. But one thing that I do not like too long of a resume. So my key is to make my resume one page. So when you get to be very tenured in your career, you start to see 1 or 2 pages for those resumes. But the key to I think a clean resume is a 1-page resume. However you have to get there, 1 page is key for me. And then formatting. So if it's hard to read, just try not to get too sexy with your resume. Your resume needs to look visually appealing, but you want to have vital information on there. So when you have too many graphics, when you want to put your profile photo, sometimes it doesn't always lend well to your recruitment process. So make sure that you're sharing your resume with others. You're making it easy to read with some really clean formatting for recruiters to follow. And also, when you don't have the inclusion of metrics or data, we'll talk about impact evidence and skill statements, but find those opportunities to add numbers. If you're working at burgers, talk about working at Burger King, talk about how many burgers you were able to produce in a day. If you're working at a bank, talk about how much money you were able to work through transactions in a week. Find those ways to include metrics, percentages. It's okay to embellish. Of course, you do not want to lie to recruiters, but think about ways to really tell the story. Even if you don't, if it feels simple or plain to you, figure out a way to creatively tell your story and your impact at your work. And talk about that impact. Think about things like highlights, things that stood out. So you were able to build a system. You were able to be the first to be an ambassador for a campus program. I think that sometimes as new grads, we doubt ourselves. Those things that you do with the Lanthorn are important. Those things that you do with the American Marketing Association, they're important. So talk about those monumental things and bake that into your resume. And also, I think one of the misses is that, again, some people try to make sure that they have those key highlights, but sometimes they miss the vital information. So for me, sometimes I look at what location, where are you living? So if you don't have your location, sometimes you're already I'm phasing you out of the running for the role. So add your location, add a LinkedIn so that I can dive deeper and get a visual of who you are and some of the extra color to your profile. And so include your email. Some people forget the phone number. Try to make sure you have the basics there, because we need to reach out to you and contact you. And also that's just the start of the resume education. So make sure that you don't miss on those basic pieces of information. So I want to show you an example of a bad resume, not the worst resume I've ever seen, but an example of a resume that just tried to do a little bit too much. So if you look at this resume, you know, the graphics were added that kind of takes you away from the key points. It's hard to read, even when I looked at this resume and downloaded the PDF. It was a bit hard to read. It was pixelated, so make sure you're downloading it in a format that's readable. PDF usually works great, but sometimes you might have to do it in Word, but always go for that PDF. Even here with just your hobbies, when you try to think about things like extracurriculars, hobbies, or interests, try to make it relatable. Try to make it look like as an accent to who you are. Jujitsu and philosophy are great, but what does that mean to the person or the role? You know, try to make it make sense for you. And extra graphics like this money symbol, even like the skills, you know, when we think about the skills section, you know, it's not vital, but if you do have that skills section, you want to make sure that it's applicable to the role you're applying for. You don't want to skill like keeping it cool. You want to have a really specific and unique skill that speaks to you as a person. And also, if you see some of his statements here in bullet points, you know, we do see that they provide, you know, 50 customers per day by answering questions, close to roughly $500 in sales every week. So it's great that he's including some of those numbers there. But when we think about like this last one, once convinced a businessman to buy our entire collection of button-up shirts. Just think about ways to really can still convey some of the impact of your work, but utilize words in some of that, some of those statements to really make sense, and also have actionable, specific impact words. So we'll go over like how do we really build out those bullet points to show impact, include that data, and make it make sense for the recruiters. Also, I'm not a really big fan of the white space or the design. So again, I'm not a big fan of profile pictures on your resume, but some people like to utilize that. And I do see Troy, you have a question. I love questions.
I do. Hi, it's a pleasure meeting you all today. My question is, do you recommend using like resume templates? And if so, do you have any good ones like in mind that we could like use for our resumes?
That's a really good question. I'll open up to the panel too for if they have any tips, but I'm not the biggest fan of resume templates. What I did and what I'll talk about later is investing in somebody who is, I had a friend that does resumes on the side, and he was able to walk through some of the resumes that he makes, and we were able to use InDesign to create one. I also looked at some of my mentors who had resumes, you know, I kind of just filled in the blanks. So I think you can get creative and figure out ways to look at practical resumes. I feel like sometimes when you go to Microsoft Word, you kind of just blend in all of the other resumes you're seeing in the ATS. So I would lean on other people who are maybe your mentors or peers that have really nice resumes and figure out how to like iterate upon that. But I'll open it up to the panel to see if they have any advice on that.
Yeah, I would echo what you said, Cordell. I mean, the issue with a resume template is it can really box you in. And as soon as you start to really go outside of the boxes of the template, all of a sudden you're in Wonkyville trying to format your resume or add in the information that you're looking for. I'm a huge advocate for like a good old fashioned plain resume, because I think a lot of times that's what works best with different ATS systems. And that's what a lot of hiring managers are used to seeing today. So I like to just keep it simple.
I can jump in. I can be the opposite side of a resume template. I was using a template that on my screen, to me, did not look like it printed out with like a underlay background. But of course, once you printed it out, there was a black, almost shaded background that almost ate my entire resume as you printed it. So even some of those things that might look different on a screen, also making sure that it prints well too. I know that we're kind of out of that phase of printing, but that still does happen too. So something to keep in mind when utilizing templates or graphics that aren't your own.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Ashlyn, I saw you unmuted. Did you have anything?
I was just monitoring the chat, and Dan shared that IMO docs templates are super clean and helpful.
Yeah, and I think that if you can find those sources that really do provide, you know, something clean, or like the Career Center. I leveraged the Career Center in Grand Valley a couple times to help me check over. So there are templates out there. I would definitely just do a check, send it out to people. How does this look? Even reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn. I think that's helpful. And Ashley, I didn't check the time at all. How am I doing on time?
You're doing good. You're at 6:20.
Perfect. Cool. So now let's look at what a good resume. What are some tenets of a good resume? So something easy to read and concise, something straight to the point that recruiters can get and truly understand who you are and how you fit in this role. I think Liana talked about how some of the systems, the ATS systems, a lot of times they'll parse out some of your titles and some of your information. So you want to make it easy to read for the ATS to pull out your information and put it into your ATS. Also, again, providing numbers to support your impact, to help you tell your story, skill-based statements that utilize verbs, and also some of those quantifiable things to tell exactly what you did in the role to make it make sense for the recruiter, and also relevant work history. Now, put that next to keywords that match the job description. As I'm looking for roles and as I'm applying, my resume is a living and breathing document. So whenever I'm applying for a role, I am looking for keywords in that job description that I'm looking at on the careers page. I'm updating a resume for each role that I'm sending through. I'm not a big cover letter person, and some people do feel like cover letters add to that. But for me, I'll try to match up my experiences with the actual career, the job page that I'm going for, and pull out those words, those things that I think can relate to it. You want to make sure you have relevant work history. So maybe you have an internship or an experience. I think now as your new grads, you're coming up, I think you're still filling up your resume. So I would fill up your resume. But as you get more experience, some of those experiences may not be relevant to the role. So make sure you're choosing the experiences, the extracurriculars, the skills that are relevant to the role that you're going for. And also utilize the white space. So the white space that you have, you don't want to make sure that you're filling up your resume with nonsense or extra verbiage, but edit it. Try to format it to make it look clean, that you're utilizing a margin that looks clean. You don't want too much white space or too little. You just want the right amount. Again, I would just challenge you to go to a friend, your career center, your mentors, your peers, to say, how does my resume look? How, if you were looking at this, what are your initial thoughts? I think that could tell you a lot about the resume before you start putting it out there into the world. And I want to show this one. I really like Sophia's. Really, as you look at the top, having a really clean summary of who they are and their experience, also including their location, being in Philadelphia, a LinkedIn. I can't wait for the LinkedIn chat because I'm a super big advocate of utilizing LinkedIn as a way to kind of just boost up your application. And also you can see that as a bank teller, she has some really, really good data, leveraging organizational and prioritization abilities, having some really clear skill-based statements. I really like how she implemented some of her interests. So having your languages that you're proficient in, also your interests like Italian cuisine, gardens, and sustainability. You see how it all works together. It seems like this person put thought into how they're going to present themselves. So again, you have 6 seconds to look at a resume, for recruiters to look at your resume. So you want to make sure that it's visually appealing, that it doesn't take away from the content, and that recruiters can clearly see why you are a fit for the role. So when we think about how to craft skill statements, and these statements are really your bullet points that are under your role. So if we go back to Sophia's, the words administer the balancing of the branch's vaults, leveraging organizational and prioritization abilities. Those are skill statements that are carefully crafted. So it is a really cool strategic way to include star responses in your resume. So it's a way to tell the story of how did I address this situation through a task, through an action, and through a specific quantifiable result. And also it provides context on your impact. On my resume, I talk about building a system when I was an intern at Mercantile Bank and what that did to help us clean up delinquent loans. When you think about it, when I talk about it, it doesn't seem impactful, but when I put numbers behind it, when I add data, it helps the recruiters understand like this person can drive results and hit goals that we have for this role. So when you think about it, when I talk about STAR, think about this example, and I pulled this from, it was a university's doc, and they talked about it being a star format when we think about skill statements. So they talk about the situation of, the city needed a comprehensive room renovation for employee training workshops. This person took action in drafting and aided in drafting the room renovation model. And the result was the city now has a proper room to house their employee training workshops tailored to the city's needs. So when you think about a statement to say, like, how do I address it? How do I tell the story? They came up with this statement: save the city 35% to 50% in cost by aiding to design and plan a room renovation from concept to completion for employee training workshops. So, they're not just putting like, I helped design a room, or I helped, or I aided in the concept of completion. No, it tells a full story in one bullet point. And sometimes you need to have multiple bullet points to talk about a situation or to convey some of your work. But really being strategic and thinking about a star setup is going to help you pull out those bullet points to make it, again, make your resume make more sense for the recruiters, to help them understand your impact and how you relate to the role. So I'll end with this. And what I really just want to, again, I talked about this at the beginning, and I really think that the resume is only one piece of the puzzle. I'm a big advocate of LinkedIn. LinkedIn tells a really good visual story of your certificates, your extracurriculars, things that you're passionate about. Leverage LinkedIn. Think about resharing a post, going on and updating it as you go. Add videos, add a introduction. I think LinkedIn is such a powerful tool, and I kind of prefer that. As I'm looking for candidates, I'm looking on LinkedIn Recruiter. The ATS is cool, but sometimes I want to go to that LinkedIn Recruiter to pull in candidates. Ruthlessly prep for your interview. So this, I'm sure as the alumni relations team is going to think about like that interview and mock tips, but prepping for your interview is so important. You can get to that interview stage, and that shows that people are interested in you. Now it's your time to sell yourself. So practice with the Career Center, practice with friends, research your recruiter, research the company, look for a recent article. What is their win for the year? Have just talking points for every conversation that you have, because I think that's what's going to help recruiters, take a liking to you, for them to see you in the role, and to build that relationship. Your recruiter is going to be the person that's going to help you move through the process. So build that relationship with your recruiter, invest into those interviews. And Christina, all right, I'll stop on the LinkedIn, Christina. So the last one for me is just invest in yourself, in your brand. So again, for me, what was transformative for me, I have a frat brother who works on resumes and LinkedIn. I paid for his services, and we were able to recraft and think about, what is my presence? What do I want to convey on my LinkedIn? What do I want to convey on my resume? And when I think about investments, it's also time. Sit down and really dig into this. Again, you're new grads, you're trying to go for that opportunity. Take time to look at your resume, get drafts and edits, let people shred it to pieces and really help you transform and get better. Because again, these are your first touch points with your potential employers. So you want to make sure you're investing time and energy and getting perspective on the things that you're putting out to the world to invest in you, because your brand is so important. And again, that'll be something we'll talk about today. So I know I think that's my last one. So I just want to plug my LinkedIn. As I said, I'm active on there. If you have any extra questions, if you want to connect, learn, or chat some more, feel free to connect. And I believe, Ashley, we'll probably do questions later. I can take them now, but it's all up to you.
Yeah, why don't we do a few now if anyone has questions, and then again, if we miss any, we can reconvene and do them at the end.
Cool. I'll stop sharing.
Feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat if you do have any questions.
I have a couple. One being, it's just like little minor things that I've heard here and there. One being your full address on your resume. When you said to have your location, would you just do like the city that you're in, or cities nearby that you can travel to, or would you put your full home address on your application or your resume?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And sometimes on that application, they'll have more of your address and some of that demographical information there. For me now, I just put my location. I'll put Atlanta, Georgia. As a student, I was putting my whole address, and to me now it just feels weird. And again, if any of the panelists have any just conflicting responses to that, but to me, I just put the city that I'm in so people can know as I'm going for like in this time of remote and hybrid roles, I kind of want to make it clear that I am where I'm at so that they can make their decision and know if they could be part of that decision when you go through the process. So I'll put like city and state.
And then also as far as keywords, I know that I've noticed when I just like updated my resume just this past June. I've noticed a lot of differences in what I was getting before and what I'm not able to get now with the new resume. I was told that it could be an overqualification. So I guess my question is like, how do you decipher which keywords to use for which job you're trying to get? Like, is there a time where you change it? Is there a time where you just kind of throw it all on there and just send it out wherever you want to go? I guess that's my.
Yeah, I think you just, and that's a tricky one. I think it's case by case. For me, I want to get into the tech space. So DoorDash being a tech company, there are certain words that they use. So for me, let's say at Steelcase, it was social innovation. A lot of our community work with social innovation, but I saw on the resume, I mean, the job that I wanted, that they were using community engagement. So I switched it. And I think that there's other words like scale. Like I wasn't comfortable using scaling in my resume, but those are words that are common in the space that I want to be. So I think connecting that and seeing the common words that are threading throughout different industries or that company, I would notate that and say, okay, can I transfer some of these words to match it up? Not verbatim or taking these phrases out of the job description, but think about just words or phrases that can be interchangeable and utilizing that in your actual resume. And I don't completely.
When you say that, do you mean like a piece, like this is my resume, or would you say it's more important to kind of check your resume and go back to your resume and change those before you apply to a new position that's different than what you are before?
Yeah, I would do it before application. So when you see the job description, I would have your resume and the job description up and think about ways to connect the two. You know, if there are certain things or skill sets that they want in that, if they say you need to lead a team, I would say, and I led this work stream at Steelcase for such and such. So I think like those words of pulling that out and doing that in your resume before you go into the application phase is super important. Again, I don't know how people are, I don't know if cover letters are still popular. I'm just not a big cover letter person. So I try to just tell that story within the summary as well. So utilizing that summary space, something short and sweet. And I actually put in my summary, that's why I feel that these qualifications would make me a fit for such and such role. So even that on the top of that summary, I try to implement that title in that company so that they know I have that attention to detail. Like, this is the role I want. Here's a company I want to work for.
If you're struggling with keywords too, one tip that I've used in the past is creating a word cloud. So there's all kinds of free ones all over the internet. So take the job description, paste it into the word cloud search engine, and the bigger the word, the more times it's in the job description. So the more likely it is to be a keyword that they may be searching for. So that can give you some hints as you're kind of building that muscle to be able to cater your resume to specific job descriptions.
Okay, that's what I was asking. I think I have so much on there that my keywords for each job is not getting pulled out. They just see like this, she's all over the place. Like,
yeah, the word cloud might help kind of direct you, and especially what Cordell was talking about, like a social innovation versus community engagement, that can kind of tell you directly, hey, make sure you work this in, and you can edit some of those bullet points.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to Liana, who is going to speak about defining your personal brand. And then again, there'll be more time for questions at the end if yours was unable to be answered.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to also share my screen. Do not judge me because my slides are not as beautiful as Cordell's at all. So brace yourself because it's a little bit of a downgrade here. All right, so we're going to talk about professional brand. And I'm also not going to take credit for any help change roles internally within the organization. So I took a lot of this professional brand is your story. It's who you are, it's what you stand for, and it's how you differentiate yourself. And are you guys able to hear me?
I think you're freezing, at least for me.
Oh,
It did.
no.
I know. It did start when you shared your slides. So I'm not sure if people wouldn't mind turning their cameras off just while Liana's speaking. That might help.
No worries. I'll just talk about what's on the slides. We don't need them. It's okay. No worries. All right. So did I cut out a whole bunch or did you hear the spiel I just
I
gave?
would start over if you don't mind.
I will start over.
Thank you.
All right. So my section of today's presentation is around building your professional brand. And what that is it's a story of like who you are, what you stand for, and how you differentiate yourself from others. What skills and interests you want to highlight to leaders. And so sometimes it can be tough to be like, okay, what is my brand? Like, how do I figure that out? Who do I want to be? What story do I want to tell? And so a lot of what I want to share with all of you is some ways that you can figure out what you want that story to be. And so there are a couple of different kind of activities that I want to share that'll be ways that you can kind of delve into that. And so the first one is called the 4-box activity. And so there are 4 boxes on the screen. And Ashlyn, if you want, I can send these slides after if you'd like to share them with folks at all. But essentially there's 4 boxes. And the 4 boxes contain 1, your favorite past projects, roles and responsibilities, your least favorite past projects, roles and responsibilities, and then the skills that you need to accomplish each of them. So the top, favorite projects, roles and responsibilities, skills you need to complete it. Down below that, least favorite, skills you need to complete it. And how you would do this is you would set a timer for like 90 seconds and you would hurry and you'd fill in every single box. So give each box its own 90 seconds. And what you'll want to do is look for patterns. So this helps you see like, what do I like? What do I dislike? What am I good at? Where do I struggle a little bit? Because this whole idea is you're going to succeed by leaning into your strengths. That doesn't mean we don't want to become better people by working on our weaknesses, our opportunity areas. You absolutely do. But a quote that I had to share with all of you was to spend 80% of your time making your strengths stronger and 20% of your time mitigating weaknesses that could hold you back in your job. So for example, I'm going to give an exercise example. I am not good at cardio. I cannot run. I will die within 30 seconds of starting to run. But I'm a power lifter. I like to lift weights. I can lift heavy and it makes me feel awesome. So what do? Well, for 4 weeks out of a 5-week cycle, I lift heavy weights progressively heavier over the course of those 5 weeks. And then for the 6th week, I take a rest and do some general maintenance and a little bit of cardio, like this much, just to make sure I'm taking good care of my heart. Because what I'm doing is I'm beefing up my strengths. And I'm doing this much to beef up my weaknesses so they don't hold me back from getting to where I want to go with my strengths. And so you can apply that same thing to when you're in the job. So this whole activity is identify your strengths and think about how you can lean into them when you're building your professional brand. The next activity is called 20 things. And so this is all about strengths as well. So you're sensing a theme in my recommendations. But how it works is you'll want to set a timer again for like 60 seconds. And during that 60 seconds, you're going to try your best to write down 20 things that you're great at. So if you're great at presenting, if you're great at analytics, if you're great at paying attention to detail, you're going to slam those out on a piece of paper in 60 seconds and then take a look at what you have in front of you. Then you're going to set a timer for another 60 seconds or so, and you're going to try to write down weaknesses. Once you identify those weaknesses, try to convert them to strengths. So what you'll actually see is some of the things that are viewed as opportunities are what lend you to being strong in other categories. So the example I have in front of me is, maybe a weakness is presenting. Maybe that's not something you're great at, but on the flip side, maybe you're a great listener or you're great at creating space for others. And these are all strengths that can be included within your brand. The third activity is identifying words that describe you. So this activity is done with a pal, and I would recommend you do it with a couple of different pals. So you'll want to grab a friend, a family member, a colleague, all at different times with those kind of different aspects of your life to begin with, and ask them what 3 words they would use to describe you. And what you want to do is you'll need to take all those words, gather them up, and this is going to give you some insight into what your natural talents are. I think we all know that sometimes we are not perceived by others the same way we perceive ourselves. And so taking part in this activity is going to give you some insight into how others perceive you. And what you'll be able to do is say, okay, people are saying I'm naturally empathetic, or I'm naturally friendly, or I'm naturally, a really succinct writer when I send emails, whatever it may be. And those are things that you find you can lean into. On the flip side, you may find some items that kind of contradict with the way that you perceive yourself. And so you may want to say like, wow, are these new and exciting things that are true about me that I want to continue to embrace? Or perhaps are some of these words that have been shared with me things that I don't want to be perceived as? And then you can make the choice to start behaving differently, and you'll have the information you need in order to do that as you build your brand. Activity number 4 is called the what and the how, and it's all about learned strengths. So this is a good old Venn diagram. So 2 circles with some overlap in the middle, and one is labeled what and the other is labeled how. So under the what, you're going to want to list out what you do. This includes all the industry and professional expertise you have built up so far. So this is where we write out our job titles and our duties and our degrees and our certifications and all of that good stuff. And then on the how side, that's where you write down how you do it. So these are your behaviors and your transferable soft skills. So maybe you are detail oriented. Maybe you are a leader. Maybe you are a change champion like Cordell. Different things like that you'll want to write down in the how side. And then what you want to look at is where that overlap is. So these are strengths that you've developed maybe as a result of the work, the what that you've been doing. And so you want to look at that relationship and be able to articulate how the what that you've done has built those soft and transferable skills that you'll carry with you no matter what type of role you jump into. So with that being said, I know there's a lot of different exercises, but it can be hard to figure out how do I craft this personal brand statement. And so ultimately, what you want to do is you want to bring all of that together to craft a couple of sentences that talk about who you are. It sounds like my dog would really like me to stop talking. But you want to craft a statement of who you are and where you add value, what audiences you like to serve, and how you do this, you know, as uniquely you, which is what all of these activities help you identify. And once you have that statement, it's something that you can carry with you. And it's not something that you necessarily want to plaster on the screen every time you talk to someone new, but it's something that you can do to ground yourself when you're deciding how you want to act, behave, interview, where you want to apply. It's kind of your compass, so to speak, in who you are and how you make your decisions. And determining that is really, really important, because as you get further along in your career, you'll learn that there are places and roles and people that align with your values and those that do not. And understanding your professional brand and who you are will allow you to find the places where you can really shine and grow by aligning with those values. So that's the gist of what I have for you all. I'm happy to take any questions.
Again, feel free to share your videos, unmute yourselves, raise your hand, put them in the chat, whatever works best for you. We'd love to hear what you are thinking and what you'd like to know.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and really love, like, I think exercises are really helpful. Just want to champion things like the Hogan's assessment, DISC assessment, and some of those assessments. And then they have some expenses, but sometimes you can work with programs that allow you to do those. I think it's super helpful, like Liana was talking about, of being able to see and write down and go through exercises to help you know who you really are, because sometimes it's skewed of what you think you are and other people, how they perceive you. So you have to be aware that when you're in, you know, in your professional space. So just want to champion just those exercises are super, super helpful instead of just assuming who you are, you know.
Any other questions before I hand it off to the lovely Christina? Okay, awesome. Well, thanks everyone.
Well, thank you. That was great. And now I will be talking about utilizing and optimizing LinkedIn. I will like to say that I don't have as pretty of slides as Cordell or any slides like Liana. I'm slideless today for you. So I'd love to keep this conversational. I'd love to just chat with you. It sounds like in the room, I've got a lot of ad PR majors, recent grads as well. So feel free to have a conversation with me because this might be stuff that you already know. So happy to dive a little deeper. But of course, we need to remember that not everyone is using LinkedIn to find jobs. Some business leaders are beefing up their profiles to use as marketing tools for themselves, mentioning selling products and services. This, of course, is done by developing their personal brand, so their professional reputation online shines. So regardless of how you utilize LinkedIn, whether that is to be promoting products and services, finding a job, I'll share a personal story a little later on. I actually made a friend via LinkedIn in Boston. As I was trying to make friends, I went to LinkedIn. So it's a tool that is pretty miraculous from being able to just offer all of these great things. But regardless of how you plan to utilize it, it is important to establish your career identity before doing so. Establishing your career identity that uses your natural and best talents, you can distinguish yourself from your peers. And you might be, I guess I should do in the chat, if you want to throw who is on LinkedIn, and give me a yes if you are, a no if you're not. And just throw it in the chat. All right, I hope there's no no's, but you never know. All right, so everyone, it looks like everyone's on, so that's great. So, so the first way, the first you do create an identity is this a way that's similar to how a company makes a brand vision for a product. So similar to those kind of tricks that Liana just shared, those workshops, I guess. So one of the major things that you're going to focus on is, instead of selling a product, you're selling yourself. So really asking yourself the question of, do I know what my personal career identity is? It's not your job title. It's not, roles that you've had in the past or your volunteer experience. It's your career identity. So that unique reputation that you have or want to have and want to advertise to the world. If you don't have an answer to this question, it is okay. Not everyone immediately knows and is able to say what their career identity is. And that's why some of these tips and tricks that we're sharing with you are helpful, so that you have some of those tools in your tool belts, if you will, to pull out when you have some of these, when you are writing your About Me section in LinkedIn, and when you are writing that summary on your resume, you have some of these tips and tricks to really get those wheels spinning in your brain. The most common mistake people make with LinkedIn is just creating the profile and leaving it to sit. If you haven't touched it in years, it definitely needs a major overhaul. Throughout your career identity is your professional reputation or your personal brand. It reflects what other people's opinions of you as a worker, as a leader, the associations they make of you, what they think of you, and what they think you do or don't do well. So a job title is a title, but it's not who you are when we refer to your career identity. So really, it's continually defining and promoting your personal brand to keep it vibrant and to distinguish yourself in the workplace. You really need to work on setting yourself apart by emphasizing your talents in a way that showcases what is distinctive about you. So it's really about you. It's taking the time to write down those strengths, write down those weaknesses, really figuring out who you are so you can then best relay that out to other people and other folks along the way. People who do display an excellent personal brand find it is the very reason for their success. As I mentioned earlier, I actually made a friend on LinkedIn. I've connected with potential and future colleagues. So let's say that there is a job I'm interested in. I was actually in the midst of a very long job search in the midst of 2020 during the pandemic as I was trying to relocate. So I was finding tons of jobs, and then I was digging deeper to find out, okay, who worked at that company? Are they on LinkedIn? Can I send them a connection? Can I have a quick 15-minute Zoom call with them to just learn about their role, learn about the company? So it's not even something where it's just finding the job and then clicking off LinkedIn to apply for the job. It's really utilizing all of the tools that the tool has. When I did move to Boston, I needed friends. So I went to LinkedIn and did a search of Grand Valley alums in Boston, and I found friends, which is also very cool. So it's not just a professional tool. Has anybody found success in finding jobs, looking for jobs on LinkedIn, or have they had success in connecting with folks that they were trying to? Ariana, do you care to elaborate on that?
I was connected with someone at the Detroit Pistons, and after we started interacting on each other's posts and stuff, she was able to get me a job shadow and everything, so I was able to be her little associate kind of thing, I guess, assistant for the day. And I've never met her, don't really know anyone in those offices either, and that's always that's my dream is working in a sports field. So we grew the connection off of LinkedIn and everything. So I would definitely say LinkedIn has been very helpful. So
that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So the components of your career identity are the essence of who you are as a person, which include your work strengths, your accomplishments, your image, your passion, and personality traits, along with others' perceptions of you applied in a work environment. Advancing your personal brand is the most effective career development strategy you can implement. And to help you define your career identity, to translate it to your LinkedIn, I have a couple of prompt questions for you to kind of ponder on as you're, approaching your profile. Again, what are your top strengths? What are the talents and things you're best at performing? And what are the most important accomplishments you've made for each job, mainly focusing on the last 10 years. For those that are recent grads, you might not have that, but that's okay. And then with these answers, incorporating them into your professional experience section and the about section of your LinkedIn. The professional experience section should be written in the third person and states facts using the formula, your actions equal results. So again, kind of tying back into Cordell and the summary and the about me section of LinkedIn, these are all, plug and play that you have your executive summary for your resume. That would make a great about me section on your LinkedIn. So kind of keeping those tools all in your back pocket as well. Your about section is written in first person. It is more personal and should offer a glimpse at your personality and should cover what you're best at. You create a positive impact on readers when you make this section more personalized and genuine. As a CEO of your own brand, your job is to actively build and shape your reputation into a very appealing one. So this is your time to ask a few coworkers, managers, if they would write a professional LinkedIn recommendation for you. The best way to get one is to ask for one, which LinkedIn makes it really easy for you to do. And I recommend that as you are, sending requests for recommendations, in the request, I like to make a note of what I'd like them to cover, and I type out a few lines that they can easily copy and post onto my profile. I'm not writing it for them, but I'm giving them a great base to start their summary off of. It is wise to write and publish a recommendation for those that do give you one. So it's always nice to return the favor, and also might be a great enticing way for you to get them to write you your recommendation is to write them one. The goal is to have 5 to 8 recommendations with at least 1 to 2 written in the last 2 years. By differentiating yourself from the competition, you show your uniqueness and impress anyone that looks at you on LinkedIn. I think that LinkedIn is one of the most valuable career management tools, so please don't ignore it. Use it to help yourself by presenting a polished profile that shows you in the best possible light. And I would be happy to at least show you my LinkedIn, since I feel like I have to show you something. I'll show you my LinkedIn and I'll kind of cover a few of the areas that we talked about that are of importance. And I do have a large monitor, so if this isn't showing up well on your guys' screen, just let me know.
It looks good.
Okay, cool. I will, even during my presentation, I had to add some enhancements to my LinkedIn that weren't filled in. I had to add a banner photo. So there was even things that I learned as I was going through this process as well, in completing a full profile, which recruiters are looking at. So again, we've got some opportunity up here in the headline. So if you are seeking a job, this is an opportunity to include some great keywords, especially as we mentioned some of those words from the job description. So if you're looking some of those, pull those and say, add those into your header as well. All of these keywords on LinkedIn are searchable. All of these words are being searched for by recruiters. So the more words that you have on your profile, the more searches you're going to show up in, and the more likelihood that you're going to be reached out to by a recruiter. And I'm already seeing requests come through, so feel free to connect with me. Thank you. Okay, right here, this is something I had to beef up myself. I did not have an about section, which maybe is why I was so difficult searching for jobs 2 years ago, but I now have an about section. It is written in third person, enthusiastic and driven fundraising manager with a proven record of implementing best practices and processes to increase volunteer engagement and philanthropic support. Of course, I go on to list some of my key skills, which again are searchable, so be sure to keep those keywords. Those, again, you can go down into your description, into your job experience here. People like to do this a couple different ways. I've seen people just write a summary of their position. I have it built out a little bit like my resume. I don't know if Cordell or Liana has any insight from HR perspective. It's been quite a few years since I've been in HR, but I'm not sure if there's a preference on that. But again, this is an opportunity where those keywords are pulling into searches. So whatever you are writing in those boxes, just make sure that you're highlighting your biggest accomplishments. And And then of course down here, I have my education, my skills, which you can get endorsed for, and then of course my recommendations. And as you can see, I've given not as many as I've received, but it is always good practice, best practice to give a recommendation when you receive one. And of course your opportunity to add any involvement and interest down here as well. So that is really all I've got. Of course, happy to answer any questions, and I will stop sharing my LinkedIn, and feel free to send me a request.
Thank you so much, Christina. So let's open it up to questions, either directed to Christina specifically or any of the panelists about tonight's programming. I'll go ahead and start with the question. Cordell, so we talked a lot about putting location on your resume. Do you have any suggestions for people who are trying to relocate? Do you see that as maybe a crutch that would make it harder for them if they're looking for a job in a different state or a different area? Or is there kind of a tip or trick that might help with that process?
Yeah, Ashlyn, that's the $1 million question. That's a tricky one. And for me, in my case, my role, I think that now with the future of work just being very much flexible and hybrid, you're going to see more and more organizations offering remote roles. So I would filter for that in your careers like page when you're looking. I think remote roles are awesome. I'm a big advocate of that. I do see a lot of roles opening up, although Silicon Valley has been cutting a lot. San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Austin, Texas. I would look at major hubs of thinking about relocation, because you are going to have a better chance, because most of those companies, a lot of those companies are headquartered. But I think you can, my big thing for me, I found a role that I really like, and I prioritize that over location. So I'm an advocate for looking for the right fit and the right company over just moving for a location. So in some ways you are pigeonholed. If you live in a certain location, there are certain jobs that you're going to be ruled out for just based on location. But talk about that in your interview. You sell yourself, because relocation is also sometimes offered in those packages. So yeah, I wouldn't self-select yourself out based on location. Have optimism when going into it. It's a tricky question though.
Thank you.
Another option could be, if you're not specifically looking for relocation support, is you could look for a fully remote role that allows you to live anywhere you want in the US and then move there. So that's just something else you could consider too.
Just from experience recently, when I was applying a few years ago, I didn't have where I was living, but in my executive summary, I did say I was hoping to relocate to Boston. So I had a location where I wanted to go, because my partner had relocated out here, so I knew the destination. It was the looseness was where I'd end up as far as the career went, but I still said relocating to Boston, so they at least knew that I wasn't there, but that was my goal.
I have a question for Christina. Are endorsements and recommendations on LinkedIn the same thing? But if not, how are they different?
That is a great question. And no, they are not the same thing. So endorsements are on your skills, which are keywords, again, keywords, that you are entering, skills that you're saying that you have about yourself. So event planning, volunteer management, data entry, all of those types of things. And then I can go in and I can say, sorry, you've already unmuted and I lost you on my screen, but I can say, Haley, I did find you. I could say, Haley has skills in data entry, and I can endorse you for that. So it's literally a push of a button from my perspective to endorse you. A recommendation, I'm literally typing a summary of my experience working with you. So there's a little bit more, I guess you could say, skin in the game for both parties involved, because it is more than just a click of a button. So endorsements are helpful. I definitely don't think that they carry nearly as much weight as a recommendation though.
Thank you for explaining that. That makes better sense. Because I have seen both on LinkedIn. And also, can you explain again briefly what's the appropriate way to ask for a recommendation?
Yeah, so I on LinkedIn there is a way, and I believe I will actually double check on how it's done, but I believe if you're on their profile, there's a button where probably three little dots that you can click and you can say ask for a recommendation, or it's on the recommendation page. Either way, I'll make sure Ashlyn has those those details on how to do that. But yes, I would either ask them personally via email or via LinkedIn. And then what you could do also beforehand, before you ask them, is to write them a recommendation. So it's like, I wrote you a recommendation and now I'm asking you. So it's like you've already done them a favor. So now you're asking for one in return versus, hey, will you write me a recommendation? And then they do, and then you run away and ghost them, which you wouldn't, but you might, you know. And thank you, Liana. We've got instructions in the chat. So it is on their profile of who you're wanting a recommendation from. Click the more button and then request a recommendation. And then within that too, you can also give them some key points, some things that you want them to talk about, kind of get their wheels turning a little bit. Again, you're not writing the recommendation for them, but you may be reminding them of a project that you worked on, or things like that throughout your time as colleagues or coworkers or teammates.
Okay, thank you so much.
It looks like we have a question in the chat from Simone. If any of you would like to take it, it's for a resume. Do you see any value in including work experiences that may not directly relate to the field or job you're applying for?
I would say I would be strategic about which role or task that is. Again, as a new grad, you're not going to probably have enough experiences just based off of maybe internships or jobs that that can really fill your resume. So at this point, I think just showing that you've had steady work, that you've been in a certain setting, that you can progress in roles and fill in those gaps. I think this is appropriate now in the stage that you're in. As you progress in your career, I would just be strategic of like, what is it, the value of having this role here? What is it telling about my story? Was I in it long enough? Do I have a good relationship with that employer? Did I leave gracefully? So I think you want to be just strategic. If it isn't relatable, what skill are you displaying or conveying with that role?
Yeah, I would definitely echo exactly what Cordell said. And if you're looking for a way to list that out on your resume, what I've done in the past is, let's say you're an accounting major. And so perhaps where you have your work experience, where you're including all your bullet points, that section might be titled accounting experience. And then you may have a section below that that says other professional experience. And that's where you could list out like just the job title, employer, and dates you were there. And that can be something that you do just to, demonstrate what you were doing, where there were maybe gaps in your employment, or just that you have been a professional for a longer period of time. And for those of you that may have gaps due to like illness, caring for a family member, caring for children, whatever it may be, that's a spot where you could put that in too, if it fits for you.
Adrian is asking for thoughts on chronological versus skill-based resumes, especially for entry-level workers and recent grads.
Yeah, I can take this one to start, though I'm sure Christina and Cordell will have thoughts too. I feel like a little on the fence with it when it comes to entry-level workers or recent grads. Where I've seen skill-based resumes be the most successful is with those who are looking for a career pivot. So, for example, for a long period of time, I was like an HR generalist. And I wanted to pivot to being a specialist in a specific area of HR. But what was happening is I wasn't getting hits for a lot of those roles because folks were just looking at me, pigeonholing me a bit. And so I would look at the job description and then list out, skills section. So for example, one role I was going for was employee experience. And so they were looking for someone who had experience in event planning, employee listening activities, and something else. So I actually listed those out instead of job titles and then bullet points of examples where I'd done that specific work. And I ended up getting an interview and a job offer for that role. So I've seen it used a lot for pivots. I haven't seen it used as much for entry-level workers, but Cordell and Christina may have a different perspective.
I echo what you said. Totally agree.
Ditto.
So I guess I'll follow up to that. Sorry, I'm having some internet difficulties, so I cut my camera. So we have a lot of students, and actually Cordell and Christina, you were these students probably too, that have jobs that are not traditionally associated with advertising and public relations career. Hostess, server, shift manager, important things to get you through school that align with a very flexible schedule, right? That don't necessarily sing to your administrative duties or your excellence in, scheduling and creativity, for example. And so how do you, or nannying, for example, we have a lot of students that work as childcare providers. And those skills, when you pick through them, yeah, they directly apply to ad and PR. But on the surface, in just the job, discussing the job, what the job entails, I mean, that maybe is a broader reach that somebody else might have to make. So, Simon's question that he put in earlier got me thinking about that, which was to say, like, I mean, one, going through school and working part-time or full-time or whatever, it's its own, its own honor, because that shows me something as an employee, a hiring agent too, that they were able to even make that happen. And then two, though, sometimes they don't directly align. So, I've been sitting here kind of wondering about like how to make a better match for that, because, they have all these, portfolio items that they're bringing in. We have real clients in almost every class. I mean, you guys know all that, but sometimes, their work experience doesn't directly relate to that. So I guess my question is two parts. One, how do you make that happen? And then two, how do you best utilize portfolio and in-class experience to show that you are not a 0 years experience person, but rather you do have client experience?
And I feel like, again, I do think that these experiences that we have while in our programs in our universities, they do have weight to it. So I would maybe craft, I've seen bullet points of the project itself, or maybe a professional organization that you were in school, utilize that as a bullet point. I would maybe pull those up and replace that, other than maybe your nanny job or your line worker job, and really embellishing. I've also seen people, I know GitHub is a really technical portfolio, but I've seen other portfolios on, I forget the names, but linking to a portfolio or a project in your resume is kind of cool for me as well, when it's non-technical. So I would just figure out ways to make a bullet point and bring that up and bubble that up with your class, the name of your project, and your role that you played into that project, your professional organization. Were you on the e-board? Did you chair something, and what was the result of that if you won an award? So I would utilize some of those highlights of your school career and utilize that as a full bullet point similar to your work experience. My thoughts there.
You could also do your chronological resume and share more of your story in the soft skills that you're bringing in your cover letter. But to Cordell's point, not everyone loves cover letters. I personally don't like writing them, but I have had success in getting jobs with them. So it's one of those things too. So yeah, I don't know that we have a great answer for you.
I have an unconventional idea to just throw out there. So if you're doing good old chronological, what you could do is, for example, if your students are working with real clients, they could put something like student engagement with blah, 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 and then actually write down the duties as if it were a job in their, advertising PR experience section of their resume. So they could kind of plug it in that angle. I know, I had a thesis project where I had to engage with a client too as a consultant, and I put that on my resume. So that's one angle they could take. The other angle is you can actually upload some work samples directly to LinkedIn. And I am a fan of the good old hyperlink. And so what I'll do sometimes is reference a project or body of work in my resume and then hyperlink a portion that will take them then to my LinkedIn or my Google Drive, whatever makes sense, and actually open up a sample of my work directly corresponding with that bullet point. So that's something they could try too.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, with that, thank you so much, Christina, Cordell, and Liana, for your candor tonight and for an impactful workshop. I am going to go ahead and paste contact info into the chat. Please feel free to reach out to any of the leaders or the Alumni Relations Office. Additionally, keep your eyes on your email. I'll send a follow-up in the next couple of days that will include the video of tonight, as well as contact info and Liana's